Welcome to Money Secrets with Bill and Mike.
I'm Bill Alexander.
And I'm Mike Tove. Bill, today I want to talk about needy advisors and myth busting.
Oh my goodness.
Because not long ago I came across a guide to retirement by a major media personality that is popular on TV and radio about giving financial advice. And I found some of the advice to be a little bit on the thin side. Things like save more for retirement.
Well, of course.
Except how does anybody use that? Or with faith, integrity, and courage, anything is possible.
Well, it's nice.
Yeah, it's nice, but it doesn't help. So we'll be right back, and we're going to spend some time talking about this and kind of get to some meat and potatoes, as you will. So please stay tuned.
So, Mike, what's the problem with getting our advice from the media moguls that give us this information?
I think the problem is that kind of advice is so generic and so simplified that it ignores the idea that people are different. For example, there is a guideline out there that says that for retirement purposes, for retirement planning purposes, the amount of money that a person should have at risk in markets is determined by 100 minus your age, right, as a percentage, okay? It's a nice generic thing, except would anybody want to suggest that Warren Buffett, who is now in his 80s, should have less than 20% of his entire net worth invested and everything else not?
That's pretty silly.
Probably not. And at the same token, somebody who has a total retirement of $10,000 probably shouldn't have an awful lot of that in the market, if at all.
No risk. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, the bottom line is it's all specific to your situation.
Correct. It's about individual circumstances.
Right.
But nonetheless, we get a lot of blanket advice that is delivered to us as though it's the gospel.
Well, it's information.
And this is where
it's not necessarily wise, it's simply information. And it's depending whether it's useful or not.
And so I want to hit on a couple of examples.
Great.
And so I've got some things here, and we're going to have graphics up on for our folks.
Very good.
But one of the advices that I hear a lot, people come in and they go, well, I'm going to pay off my house early, pay off my mortgage early. And I'm not convinced, and there's data on this, that that's necessarily always a great idea. So let's take an example. Let's assume that you're buying a house, or you've bought a house, and let's just say that the price is $250,000, or at least that's what you've mortgaged. I mean, you put money down, and you're going to get a loan of 3.75%, which is the average rate. That's what the national average is right now. Your monthly payments on a 30-year mortgage are $1,157.79 a month.
Okay.
Now, over the next 30 years, you're going to actually pay for a $250,000 house $416,804.40.
With all that interest.
Yeah, ouch,
okay.
Right?
Right.
So, people say, well, pay off the mortgage early. Throw an extra $300 a month at it. Great. Now you're going to pay $1,457.79 a month, and you're going to save 9 years and 5 months off of your mortgage payment. Your total cost goes down to $360,074.13. You have saved $56,730.27.
Not bad.
And people go, that's a good idea. And I get that with one problem.
Okay.
Suppose you had taken the $300 a month and then invested it, and you got 6% a year. At that rate, by the time 20 years and 7 months goes by, in other words, the amount of time to pay it off, you would have actually earned $146,697.19. You are $89,966.96 ahead. You have more money in your pocket than what you spent to pay off the mortgage early.
So I get it. So the basically for some people, it would be wise to save the money each month rather than to use that extra money to pay off the mortgage early. Now, frankly, from my perspective, while I can see the merits of what you're saying, I would take the other side for most people. Not everyone, for certain, but for most people, having your, at least to the degree that if you can have your mortgage paid off by the time you retire, that is a huge blessing, and to me, that should be everyone's goal. Regardless of the numbers as it relates to, you could have a little more money if you did it this way versus that way, because having your home paid off when you retire is such a huge benefit. Number one, when you retire, at that point, for most of us, our income is now fixed, and having our mortgage paid off reduces our expenses considerably, and that is really important. The other reason that it's so important is because if your home is paid off, you have zero risk of foreclosure, and in bad times, people have their homes foreclosed against. And so knowing that your home is safe, that allows me to sleep better. I think that's an important aspect. Plus, once your home is paid off, it still appreciates. It's still really and truly an investment of sorts, at least it is for your children's sake, as it relates to that. But the bottom line is, I do think that having your home paid off is a huge blessing to folks that should not be ignored. Plus, your example is based upon good returns without the markets going down. In other words, if you had that consistent return each month, each year, then maybe. But seniors can take less risk. We know that. Having your home paid off as a senior really is a blessing.
Except, number one, most people that are buying a home are going to be still working 20, 30 years from now when the home would be paid off. So this business of paying it off in advance for retirement doesn't make sense because it would be paid off either way. Secondly, most financial people don't really suggest that a house is an investment because you're living in it and you can't use it. So we're going to come back with a couple of other examples. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back.
Well, Mike, you know, as it relates to paying off your house, not paying it off, it really goes back to the same thing we started with. It depends on your specific circumstances as to which way is best.
And this, you know, our theme from the very beginning has been about getting professional advice and not taking blanket advice from generic sources that really are disseminating advice without knowing who they're talking to.
Absolutely.
And we're guilty of committing that right here with the show, except we are offering an opportunity for people to call us and come in and actually have a chance to get individual questions answered and get people that know what they're doing, that have a fiduciary responsibility, I do, you do, to give quality and fair and balanced advice.
Let's talk about another topic that I think there's a lot of myths, as it will, and a lot of it has to do with retirement accounts.
Okay.
Well, I know that you talk a lot about how to organize retirement accounts.
One of the things that I try to get people to understand is, what is everybody, when I look at portfolios, everybody wants to chase returns. And we all love returns because returns are good and losses are bad, and it doesn't get any simpler than that. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. And so chasing returns is not necessarily the smartest approach. There are two components to portfolio success. One is the expected return. The other is the probability of actually achieving it. And we have
You're
we have
talking
been
about
told,
risk.
Risk. I'm talking about risk. And so, and in fact, William Sharp won the Nobel Prize for coming up with the first concepts of risk-adjusted return back in 1966. So this is something that's been around for over a half a century. But simplistically, let's take a look at this. And again, we have a graphic for this. Let's assume that we are looking at two portfolios. Portfolio A, which has an average expected return of 10% per year. Wow, that's a big one, right? And portfolio B has an expected return of 8% per year.
Pretty good.
Not shabby, but most people go, well, give me 10 instead of 8, right? But let's throw the risk in there. Let's assume that in portfolio A, our risk of achieving it is only 50%. It's only 1 in 2 chance of actually getting that.
Not so good.
Not so good. And choice B has a risk of 10%, meaning a 90% chance of achieving it.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, so if you look at the risk-adjusted returns, A, which everybody would jump on, is only a 2% risk-adjusted return, whereas B is over 7%, 7.2, which would predict doubling of money every 10 years based on the rule of 72.
So clearly, for most of us, it would be in our
B,
best interest to go with B.
Right.
Right.
But when we are looking only at returns and we're not looking at both components, we miss that other piece of the picture.
Absolutely. So, well, I know a lot of folks look at it the other way, is what's my risk? I don't want to take risk at all.
Well, right.
And of
Well,
course,
people-
that's
but-
not possible either.
No, but but when people say, I don't want to take risk, where do they end up going? They run to the bank. And I had a client a few years ago that had the entirety of her net worth, which was approximately $2 2/3 million in fixed interest accounts, basically bank money market accounts. And
which basically means she was losing money each year to inflation.
To inflation and taxes, because
Sure.
the interest is taxable.
Right.
And when I asked, why are you doing this? The response was, well, what if there's an emergency?
For 2.2 million. Okay.
2.67 million.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah,
Well,
2 2/3.
okay.
And I'm going, what kind of an emergency are you imagining? That's a little too.
Well, that's the opposite
That's
side
the
of
opposite
this,
side
right?
of it.
Okay.
And so it comes back. We just keep coming back to this, isn't it? Balance.
Right. Absolutely.
But when people are giving generic advice out there, because you hear it all the time, oh, yeah, this thing does this and this thing does that. You should. In fact, I remember listening to the radio in the morning before the markets opened up, right? And keeping tabs on what they said the futures for the day were, and then what the results were. You know what's scary is that about half the time they were right.
Sounds like the weatherman.
Which means, isn't that basically a coin toss? So let's see, if it's heads, the markets are going up. If it's tails, they're going down.
That's exactly what it is.
And so this
Well, it's scary. I mean, and anybody who's trying to invest runs into that very thing. And you know, the definition of an expert is a person who can tell you why they were wrong yesterday.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought an expert was somebody who was more than 25 miles away from home with a slideshow.
Well, there you go. That's another definition.
So the point is that when we are looking at portfolios, when we're looking at this, it's important to give fair consideration to both sides. Earlier I talked about Warren Buffett, right?
Right.
And the fact that here is a guy that can afford to take an awful lot more risk than someone who doesn't have an awful lot.
Well, of course, everyone comes to you differently. I mean, you have some very wealthy people. I mean, their net worths are way up in the stratosphere, but they have no liquidity. You know, it's all tied up in their small business, or it's all tied up in their farm or real estate of some sort. And they have a special circumstance too.
Right. And again, So our message here, and where we're coming to the money secret on this, is that you can't take generic advice from somebody who doesn't know your individual circumstances.
Absolutely, no question about it.
So we'll be right back in just a minute. Please stay tuned, and we're going to start wrapping this up. Welcome back.
Well, Mike, over the years, I've served on a number of charitable endowment boards responsible for millions of dollars in terms of how much money it can make. And of course, as you know, we've had downturns. And I got real upset with our financial advisors with our endowment boards because they were losing money. And so I went directly to their investment analysts and said, look, why, we have a fiduciary responsibility not to lose money. What can you do to avoid losing money? And you know what they said to me?
They put you in bonds.
They said the only way we can assure you of not losing money is to buy bonds, a total portfolio of bonds. And I basically said, we got to get new financial advisors. These guys are absolutely crazy.
Right. And that, that's absolutely correct. And it's an amazing thing how often we hear that advice. And don't misunderstand, bonds have value. They're not some horrible thing, but going to a portfolio of 100% bonds doesn't actually reduce risk. In fact, there's data that suggests that a 100% bond portfolio has more risk than a mixed portfolio.
Well, particularly right now. Because, well, I mean, for the last number of years, we've been a very low interest, and of course, bonds are very interest sensitive. Well, truthfully, bonds only have one way to go, and that's up. In other words, interest rates are going up slowly,
when interest rates
but
go up, bond values go
down. Absolutely.
Right. But this comes back to the risk-adjusted return concept again. So if you are increasing, if you have higher risk but higher return, your risk-adjusted return may not change. Conversely, if you reduce your risk, that's a good thing, but if you are eliminating any opportunity for return, your risk-adjusted return actually could go up. And so it really has to do with comparing the two and seeing where the mixes are.
Well, for me, it also depends on the investor, the person, and their financial situation and what their needs are.
Time horizons
all of
are
those
very
things
important.
Because, well, I mean, even for me, when I see these blanket, if you're X age, your age, you have to have equities versus bonds in a certain proportion, and I think that generally that advice is just absolutely crazy.
Well, the reason that is out there is because these models are being spat out by computers.
Well, it's also spit out by folks who only want you invested in equities and bonds.
Right, but they are relying on computer programs to make those determinations rather than actually sitting down and doing the work themselves. And I can tell you that I have actually taken those computer modeled portfolios and have then broken them down, and by doing individual manipulation, getting away from the computer. The computer is a great start. But if you stop there, you're missing a bigger picture, because by doing individual manipulation and asking some basic questions, what you end up actually being able to do is increase total return, decrease risk, and your opportunity gets larger.
Well, for so many folks, it's so hard to get away from the chafe, if you will. And of course, computers give you data, and it gives you information, but it doesn't give you what's in your best interest.
Hey, welcome back. So Bill, we're going to wrap this up. The money secret here is we've done this 1,000 times. Get individual, personalized advice.
From an advisor you can trust.
And someone who knows you as much as is necessary. I mean, you can't get advice from somebody who doesn't know who you are. Or what
Well,
you
there's
do.
no formula that works for everyone.
No.
Everyone needs a specific, tailored financial plan based on their own circumstances.
Which is why it's important for folks to come in. And by the way, we are coming out with a brand new book called Money Secrets with Bill and Mike.
For general advice.
And yes, well, no, but here's how they turn general advice into specific. Give us a call, come on in, and give us a chance to chat. We'll give you a free copy of the book.
Absolutely, and it's a wonderful book.
Yeah, yeah. Well, of course we're biased, but
We wrote it.
I'm Mike Tove with AIN Services. I do financial planning. Please call me at 800-363-2296.
And I'm Bill Alexander with WG Alexander and Associates. We're a law firm in Raleigh that focuses on estate planning, elder law, and asset protection. I'd also invite you to listen to my radio show on Saturday mornings at 11 a.m. on WPTF 680 a.m. And to look for our long-term care seminars each second Wednesday of each month.
And we'll be back next week with another topic of Money Secrets with Bill and Mike. Please tune in.
See you then.